Imagine you are on a train traveling through time. As you avert your gaze to the outside, you see a thick jungle, heavy rain, and feel the mighty roar of thunder. As we move through time, we see small settlements emerge, children playing, adults using the produce of nature to sustain themselves, coexisting with the environment. We are filled with feelings of wonder and joy. Moving forward, we see more settlements develop, each one more distinct and more sophisticated than its predecessor. Kingdoms rise and fall. We see scientific development, new discoveries, and inventions targeted to improving human life. We see large cities emerge, buildings that wonder us. The world is slowly growing more complex. As we move through the ripples of time, we feel a void develop in us, a void of greed that demands more and more from the earth, which eventually leads to recurring conflicts. The atmosphere on the train now becomes dark and cold. We see a dark mass enveloping the earth. The sound of gunfire and the loud moans of pain and fear fill us with great grief and sorrow, something that is missing from us as we move into a new life of constant conflict and terror. The world wars plunged the world into chaos and disarray, and by the end, it called for increased global cooperation to avoid such disputes. Still, then, we fell into a bitter ideological power dispute between two superpowers, the US and Russia. By the end of the Cold War, the world was on the right track towards development, and yet conflicts over resources are only increasing. The world we live in is torn apart because we crave for resource dominance, and that has only left us with so much good. The growth that we have witnessed has been uncontrolled, and we are chugging down resources at a rapid rate. Current projections estimate that by 2060, the resource consumption will have quadrupled. The population is expected to almost double, and with the current status of global use of resources, we cannot save enough for the future generations. Currently, economies are taking nationalistic routes, that is, looking out for its own citizens without the regard for others and the earth, to grow their economies to compete and develop. Nationalistic economies tend to be resource hungry. Although they lead the way in economic growth, it is no longer sustainable. Our ideology is singularly linked with sustainability, resource consumption, and how we dominate. In the following years, there have been increased calls for global cooperation to combat climate change and be more sustainable. However, a more radical approach is required if we are to be sustainable and tackle environmental issues. I am a proponent of globalization and believe in global citizenship. That is, the problems of humanity can be resolved with democratic internationalism. Democratic internationalism is the idea that all people matter, no matter where they live, and that universal freedom and human rights can be fostered for all mankind. World citizens believe in civic globalization, and that by thinking globally and acting locally, we can effect a positive change across all barriers. A world that is more closely connected can be helpful to achieve the sustainable development goals laid out by the United Nations. It can lead to a deeper understanding of how our environment and our consumer goods are globally connected. The fight against climate change, for example, is one example, but also consumers that demand the fair production of the t shirts and other products can contribute to the achievement of the SDGs. There have been calls on various levels to instill such change in society. Nevertheless, it seems all but reachable now. Internationalism will promote the community to be more sustainable and therefore enable us to use resources judiciously. Let us go back to the train journey. Now imagine a world that has become sustainable, able to appreciate nature and the surroundings that we live in. The journey through time will not end. Looking back, we have to hope that the next generation will be able to appreciate us for what we did. We see ourselves at the crossroads of a decisive moment in all of humanity. We must not base our current actions on the world that we live in, but it has to be found on the world that we hope for our children to live in and grow up with the same kind of necessities. Perhaps the only way to change the world is to change the way the world functions and hope for a better future.